Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Evolving Your Data Architecture for Trustworthy AI Applications. Joining me today will be Imran Chowdhury, Chief Architect for AI, Healthcare and Life Sciences for Progress, and Biju George, Principal Sales Engineer in Progress. If you've got any questions, if you'd like to ask anything for our speakers today, then please feel free to use our questions panel over in the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll try and get through to as many as we can during our Q&A session at the end. If we can't, we'll make sure to follow up with you after this event. You can pause here. I won't read the full disclaimer, but this webinar is to provide the art of the possible guidance. So, your future output and the results that you get might change, might be different for each users. The presentation is focused on the concepts and the interplay between the Progress software and Gen AI and LLM solutions. You can pause this on demand and read the full thing at your leisure. So today, just done some introductions, but I'm sure Imran and Biju will introduce themselves as well. But we've got Gen AI and semantic search we're going to cover off initially. We're going to move through to the data hub, the data flows and envelope patterns that we have within the MarkLogic data platform, the Optic API, modeling and consumption. And then we're going to cover some healthcare use cases. Then finally, Biju is going to be joining us. He's going to do a demo. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A and discussion right at the end. So make sure to stay for that. So there's a growing number of Gen AI use cases. I've put a few here for you. You've got, more personalized content for sales and marketing people, chatbots and co-pilots for customer support, both, virtual customer support and, in production working with the customer with co-pilots, NLP-based search, so more natural language-based searching of your content or content that exists. For generating synthetic data that's often used for researching purposes, as well as data management, and finally code generation for developer productivity. And these are just a small handful. And if you want to discuss what use case is right for your business, then please do reach out to speak to either Imran or one of our colleagues who'll be able to walk you through that. Today, we're going to cover off some concepts that might be foreign to MarkLogic side of our customer base, but they're certainly applicable to our Semaphore side of the data platform, which is semantic search and Gen AI and some of the classification that's used. By taking unstructured and structured documents and applying a knowledge model to those via ontology and taxonomy, tagging, classifying of data, using fact extraction, entity extraction, things like that. Before you send it to a generative AI, mean that the results that you get back, the information you pass to the Gen AI is provided with context from your proprietary data, especially if you're using our RAG-based solution. Which means your results that you get are going to be more enhanced, they're going to be more accurate, they're going to have greater personalizations, so especially using your proprietary data rather than just what's publicly available for the models to train on. By using your proprietary data, you get much more personalized results. The speed and time efficiency of your querying of that LLM will be increased as well, because you're not having to go, well, it can't find my proprietary information, I'm going to have to look elsewhere. All of this is done in one platform, which ultimately is going to improve the user experience. What hopefully you're going to get from today is that we're building a foundation for your data platform for both providing a 360-degree view of the data that's applicable to your business. So that is the externally available data and externally available models, but also that's your proprietary internal data, that private data, that is unified, it's actionable, it's real time, and it's governed. And ultimately, those are going to, better serve your customers, improve your internal operations, as well as our rules-based approach and how we monitor data when it's in MarkLogic and the Progress data platform allows you to provide answers to regulators quicker and easier. So, without further ado, I am going to hand it across to Imran now. Imran, it is over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Let's move forward and talk a little bit about all the things we have on our agenda. We've got a lot to talk about, and hopefully as soon as we've talked, I can hand it over to Bijou for demos. So the enterprise space is a very complex data scenario. You have a lot of things going on in the enterprise. Typically, on the left-hand side, you have run the business issues where you have OLTP systems that are running web platforms, ordering systems, databases, things that are happening in real time. And then you have a lot of things going on in the observe the business, like moving stuff to a data warehouse, incorporating it with reference data. When the data warehouse is not fast enough, creating special data marts to observe the business that way. And then potentially, once you've got the ideas about what you're doing in the observe the business, you can start affecting the real-time systems again. Typically, in large organizations, this happens in the order of weeks or months or quarters, but in more faster, agile organizations, this feedback loop starts happening much, much faster. In addition to that, you have all this unstructured data that's coming in that people have a really hard time making sense of. And the way to handle accessing unstructured data these days, for the most part, is search and retrieval. But then you have, okay, what kind of search and retrieval? So MarkLogic gives you a much more simplified world, which says, hey, all of this run the business information and potentially a decent amount of the unstructured data and observe the business information can all be accessed through a single data platform, whether it's virtually or in full copy of it. That all depends on your architecture and your availability and performance needs. To get from all of this data into the MarkLogic database, MarkLogic has created a semantic data hub platform, which starts off with, hey, let's figure out where your data is. Let's be able to pull it in real time as is. So there's very little modeling going on here in the data hub. Once you have that as is data, then you can securely bring it into a curated, fit for use cases, data formats, and quality controlled content. That how you bring the data from your as is data to the curated data is available through a bunch of tools in our software stack. One of which is being able to take a look at governed models and use those models to help curate the data. You can also bring in your reference data and metadata into the same place. You can also bring in all of your governance data, your, where did this data come from? Why is this data here? Who's allowed to see this data? What licenses are available for this data? All that kind of stuff can happen in a semantic data hub. In addition to that, the data hub creates a lot of indexes that lets you look at the data, whether it came in as documents or from databases or from other data systems, in whatever format you want. And then, okay, so now I have all this data in this data hub, or which can be either a data mesh or a data fabric type of pattern. What can I do with it? Well, you can build secure transactional applications on top of it. You can feed it to generative AI systems for customized questions and answers and summaries and tasks that you would normally feed to a Gen AI system. You can feed it to downstream systems, and you can further feed it to your observe the business repositories for further analysis. All right, all of the data hub that we just talked about is powered by the MarkLogic database, which is a multi-model database with search capabilities. It's a scalable, no shared nothing architecture. It's 100% ACID compliant, highly available and secure in that we have role-based security and query-based security, both on the incoming side as well as on the outgoing side of the platform. So from a security perspective, just to further provide a little more granularity on that, is within a single document, we can have security down to the individual elements. So you could have a single document, for example, that has uh, PHI data and non-PHI data, and who gets to see what depends on the roles of the people accessing the system. So that's a way to do it. We also have anonymization and redaction on export of that data or on the outbound side. And we have, like I said, the ability to curate and govern that data based on a lot of different content as well as roles of the people that are accessing the content. Also, it runs everywhere. It runs in all of the major cloud providers and now currently supports container capabilities. So being able to spin up and spin down capacity is now a much easier function in our cloud platform. Also, you can actually combine it with cloud and on-premise combinations. Like I had one large healthcare provider on the West Coast do exactly this, where their non-HIPAA related copies of the data were available in the cloud for their partners, but all of the HIPAA compliant data was only on-premise, and they were pretty adamant about keeping it on-premise there. We also have a lot of ability to encrypt and keep this data in very protected modes from various levels. So you have sort of the consumption layer encryption, and you have the ingestion layer encryption, and you have the encryption at rest as well. And the encryption is divided up so that you can have security manager handle the keys, and the database admin doesn't even get access to see the content in the database either, right? When you can split functionality that way. Just a real quick example, healthcare.gov is one of our customers. A lot of customers run mission critical applications on us. These stats are from several years ago, but 300,000 concurrent users, 8,000 transactions per second, multiple billions of documents, and the ability to support tens of millions of healthcare policies is something that we've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years now. And we were able to get prototypes running in literally 2 to 3 weeks, where after 2 years of trying to do this on Oracle, the people who were building it had nothing to even show in terms of what might be able to be in the real system. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the data hub pattern. It's an iterative, agile pattern. Really, the idea is to load your data as is, use all of our indexes to find the right pieces of data, build in harmonization and modeling of that content so you can really understand your business objects. We really try to elevate the conversation about how to handle data from what kind of data it is to what are the business objects that the business cares about that need to be modeled and produced, and how those business objects link to each other. Then we have a lot of different mechanisms for delivery, mostly APIs based. And in an agile development process, you don't just do this once, you do this every 2 weeks. And we're very much ready for that kind of iterative approach to things. Here's an example of bringing in lots of different kind of data. So step one is to just, hey, let's get that data in there as rapidly as possible without having to do modeling, without having to sort of figure out what the end questions are, without doing sort of a waterfall design, which could take years to do, right? So once you have that raw data in, the next step here is to say, hey, let's bring that raw data in and iteratively add envelopes to that raw data, promoting data from the raw schema that it's in to the curated schema, no matter where that data came from. And so what does that translate into? Let's say we are bringing in addresses and we want to do geospatial calculations and say, hey, is this address within the weird geographical shape of Texas, with including the panhandle and all of that kind of stuff, right? Well, you need geospatial lat long capabilities, and so one way to naively to do it would be to say, oh yeah, since we're storing JSON or XML, we can just add a tag and throw it in there somewhere. But our data hub pattern provides a little bit of rigor. The rigor is really around keeping your source exactly the way it came in, so you can understand how it came in and version control it and be able to update it in a very tight and controlled fashion, and to start putting additional curated data into an envelope that does not touch the source format at all. In fact, our envelope pattern has three different kinds of envelopes. We have sort of the curated data set, we have metadata, which is all of the governance, provenance type of information. In addition to that, you can put in operational metadata, like which software ETL version actually updated this data last, those sorts of things, or how many users have hit this particular data set, and for what kinds of questions did they hit this particular data set, right? Those are all operational metadata items that you can store in the metadata section. And then the last major section is the triples. How does this data relate to other business objects in our data set? In fact, you can actually just keep the source separate in a raw data set and only keep the harmonized content in the curated, accessible, API-driven data set. So on the API side, we found that there weren't any APIs that could let you see all your data together. In fact, we had initially search for documents and Sparkle for triples and SQL for analytics, and that's fine. But what if you want to do all three of these things or simultaneously? So we basically came up with an Optic API model that lets you look at documents, rows, and graphs together, and essentially since at our core, we hold objects as documents, we can take those documents, create views on them, and from those views, we can allow you to access those documents as very flexible tables or graphs. So what does this look like in real life? Well, if we have this JSON document which has multiple lines, it will generate 2 lines of in a virtual table. And this is what those lines would look like in that virtual table. Now, this JSON document is not the only document in the database. In fact, you can have other kinds of business objects. And in this case, we have uh, the product information objects. And because there are 2 separate objects, they generate 2 separate lines. And then we can take both the order document, order object, and the product information object and combine those together to get a larger row with all of the information from both of those virtual views. And this can be done through Optic API and our SQL ODBC interfaces. So the next step, once we have all this data in there, we have Optic API to query the data and get the data out, is how do we use this with in a Gen AI use case? You know, we studied 3 architectures, which led us to all of the benefits that Phil talked about. The first architecture is just simply the out-of-box architecture, which is, hey, closed book exam, the user asks a query, the Gen AI tries to the best of its knowledge based on its training, answer the question. It may not have access to private data, and so it might just give you a hallucination or give you biases based on sort of its training data set that might have biases and so on, right? The next step beyond that is to say, okay, let's start bringing in the private data and providing the private data in a meaningful way. And this is like having an open book exam with the ability to get to the right page. In this case, you bring in the private data into MarkLogic using the MarkLogic Data Hub. You can ask a natural language query. That query gets converted into a search, which MarkLogic does just quite well. That can then bring you the top 10 or 5 data chunks that you can then give to the Gen AI as referential data to ask the actual query. And then the Gen AI can give you a better answer because it has better context. Now, this is better, but we can do much better than this because we can understand the semantics of the queries and the semantics of the content that we need to feed the Gen AI, and we can understand the semantics of the answer. And that's where semaphore knowledge capture comes into play. Again, we bring the data into MarkLogic the same way we do. We can now actually use the data hub while we're bringing the data in to semantically tag the data with, hey, this data is about this kind of content or this concept or this object and so on, right? So we can use our corporate knowledge to tag the data that we want to bring in. We then can also tag the queries so that we can understand what's important in the user's query or task. And then on the way out, if we have, say, 100 relevant chunks of data, and each of those relevant chunks has, say, 100 sentences in it, that might be 10,000 sentences, but we can totally filter those down to maybe 1,000 sentences based on the semantic knowledge and the value of those sentences based on the semantic knowledge that we have. And then the Gen AI system can answer, and we can provide further analysis of the answer and or hot links back to the graphs or the actual original content that generated the answer itself. And at this point, I will hand it over to Bijou.
Thank you, Imran. Hi, everyone. So now we'll get into the demonstration of the concepts and the things that Imran provided. So for setting up the stage for the demo, picture a bustling cityscape where streams of information flow like rivers into our fictitious company, Acme Insurance, which is at the heart of processing healthcare claims. Okay. Here, members, claims, practitioners are the major actors in this system. And additionally, there are like organizations, hospitals, and such information also come in, right? But imagine in this way, actually, right? These characters come from all over, from different, right, from the mainframe systems to some other information or custom built or quartz products of information hubs, each speaking its own language. They have their own formats and things like that, right? Which provides a major challenge to the claim specialist who finds it very difficult to identify correctly the members, the relationship between members, and process their claims, right? When it comes to members, the things are a bit more trickier because what happens is the members can come from different systems and the same member can be appearing multiple times, right? So the claim specialist has to ensure that they're understanding the member correctly, the household correctly, the deduplication of the entities happen correctly, right? So in this demo, on behalf of the provider, a claim specialist is doing the claim processing, is interacting with the data. And towards the end of the demonstration, we'll show how natural language questions can be asked by the claim specialist to this data that has been curated and made it fit for the purpose. So here, what we are essentially doing is we are bringing in the data from the source systems in its original format. Then we map them into a common format so that the claim specialist or the consuming systems do not need to understand the individual formats of each of the source systems. And smart mastering is the capability where we will talk about deduplicating the member data and ensuring that actually we are creating golden records or the golden member records, which can be used by the claim specialist. And we'll also talk about the multimodal querying and also the Gen AI interaction. Okay. So we'll start with MarkLogic Data Hub Central. This is the out-of-the-box user interface for integrating and managing data using the MarkLogic Data Hub pattern. It has majorly 5 parts to it. You can load the data in its original format. Then we model the data to the consumption format, and then the curation is the data processing steps actually where we create to convert the data from its source format to the target format, and run is the section where we create flows. Flows are nothing but sequence of data processing steps that are created through the curate method. And then we have the explore section where we can search, filter, review, and export the data. So we'll quickly look at the model section first. So this is the model where I was talking about all the actors that were involved in this healthcare processing. We will primarily focus on member, claim, and claim item in this demonstration, but the actual model is much more complex than that, which with many more entities included in it. Okay, so when we look at the member, entity. We have modeled some attributes to it actually, which is basically talking about the member information, their names, addresses, date of birth, and things like that. Okay. Creating a model is pretty simple in Data Hub Central. You add a new entity type. So that will be like member, and then you drag and drop for relationships with other entities. Okay. Now, when it comes to the curate step, again, there are many curation steps built in for all these entities. So we'll focus on member, and we'll focus on the mapping entity. So these are two different sources, MMIS and QRM are the two sources from which member data is coming in. So they're in two different formats. So if you look at the source data, this is coming in some mainframe style format actually, and you convert that into a target member format. And when you look at the MMIS, it is more coming in an XML style format, but that also is being converted into the target format. So in the mapping screen, if you look at closely, what really is happening is we are calling data processing functions to convert the source properties or the source attributes to the target attributes. So you can pick up a lot of built-in functions from here, or you can build your own functions. Like the check undefined is like a is a function that is extended from the built-in functions. Okay, so and then in the Hub Central, we can test this data and see whether everything is looking fine. Okay, the mappings are looking fine. Then what will happen is we go to the run section, and in a flow called member flow, we have all these mappings already um, configured. So we will run this mapping step. So now the mapping step is the mapping from the MMIs is being run. So in a real production system, this can all be automated through REST APIs or from a Java program or some from Gradle commands. Okay, so in the real production, this will not be the UI will not be used. UI is more used for the for building and testing the the flows and the data curation steps. Now the mapping has been completed. We'll go to the explore section and we search for a particular member by the name Drindy. And when we look at here, we can see that actually, okay, let me expand all these bubbles. Okay. So now if you look at it, actually the household is a bit complex because there are multiple Drindys, slightly different by name. They are spouses of the spouse. Nuno is like the spouse of or the dependent of two Drindys. So there is some problem here, and the problem is nothing but actually the same Drindy is coming from different systems and they are appearing as two different or multiple members, right? But they are essentially the same entity. So that is where the mastering comes into picture. So let us go back to the curate step and look at the member entity again. Let us look at the matching step. So in the matching step, what we are essentially doing is we are bringing in we are applying rules to the data and say that the data set or the records which are appearing similar, based on these rules, we give thresholds and weightages to them and say that, okay, after applying the weightages, if the weight is more than 60, okay, we are comfortable in automatically merging those identical records into a single record. If it is in this range of 43 or lesser, or between 43 and 60, we want to essentially we have to do a human review of those entities because they might not be necessarily the same. And anything less than 43, they are really independent records, so they should be just left as it is, right? So this is like a weight-based rules that have been configured. We can configure it for all the attributes on the model. Again, there is we can test it out during the development phase and ensure that the weightages are appearing correctly and stuff like that. Okay. So once the matching is done, the next step is the merging part. So if you remember, as part of the matching, we said that okay, if it is the after applying the weightages, if the threshold, if it is going above the threshold of 60, then automatically merge. What are the rules for merging? Is what is where the what are the rules to merge is configured in the merge step. Okay, so there are like merge rules. Again, there are built-in rules. You can bring your own rules to it as well, custom rules. Now the match and merge is reviewed. Let us go to the run step. There is a mastering step over here. I will run the flow. So the flow can be run together where actually the each step will be running in its sequence. In the member, when we are running it, actually we were running the mapping steps individually. So all these things can be done depending on the use case. Now the mastering step has been completed. I go back to the explore, search for Drindy. Now we see that actually the graph is becoming much more meaningful now. There is one Drindy, we can review it now, like um, what information is included. We created a golden record index, which we in this demo we are calling it as master person index. So that is a new ID that has been created, but we are keeping all other previous information about the source records from which these were all merged actually has been retained as well. Same thing with the Nuno. Nuno is child as well as um, so it's a spouse. One Nuno is spouse and the other Nuno is basically child. Okay. So that is why it is coming. So they are not really merged together because their date of birth didn't match. The rules did not really apply there. Right. So that is why Nuno did not get merged, but Drindy got merged into a single record. So that is about the member. We have created a master record. Now let us review another entity, which is the claim entity. Okay. Pretty much in the similar way we have modeled it actually. So I will directly run we'll quickly review it once. Okay. So here one thing to notice is the claims come with a lot of diagnosis codes, ICD codes, CPT codes along with it actually. So it will be very convenient for the whoever is reviewing the claim to see the description of what does that ICD code mean without looking up another system, right? And this is where MarkLogic can help you with dictionaries, taxonomies, or other knowledge models as it is, right? There are two knowledge models that we have incorporated in the demo. Here, in this one, the diagnosis codes, we are looking at a very simple ICD code dictionary. So if you look at it, this diagnosis code J330.2 has been converted into allergics institute seasonal. Okay, so this is one way of doing it. When we'll come to, let me go to another one, claim item, harmonizing. Here, we are bringing in an internal knowledge model from the MarkLogic's another product, Semaphore, the Progress Semaphore semantic platform. We are bringing in the description of the CPT codes from that system. Right. So again, when you test it out, so I have to bring in another data here. So here we can actually test any document from the source system. So let me put this document. Okay. So the claim identifier is 1001. The CPT code is 61140, and this is the place where actually it brought in the description of that CPT code 61140. Work also ultrafine with biopsy of brain or indicational. Right. So now we have reviewed this. Let me go and run this claims flow as well. So there are around 1,000 claims that will be harmonized, and we can directly explore from here how the data looks like. Okay. So, okay. Now coming to the situation of, okay, how do we interact with this data, right? So now let us quickly go back to MarkLogic's query console screen. So we have all the data in its original in its curated format like JSON, or if it needs to be transformed into XML, it can be transformed into XML as well. So we can interact with the data in this way over a REST API or some other any other web applications um, or other analytical tools which handle with XML and JSON data. Additionally, as Imran was mentioning, the data is also available as like SQL data or as graph data. So let us review a couple of SQLs over here. And if you really look at it, I didn't do anything to convert that into convert the document data into the relational format because it is already built into the data hub, that kind of projections based on the model, right? So here I'm running a command, an SQL command or SQL script to give the count of claims with a total between 1,000 and 7,000 and $10,000. Okay, so that is we got the answer for 64. Let us focus on this a bit. Actually, select distinct patient from claim FHIR where diagnosis description is diabetes with neuropathy. So we get like the records of this, right? Now the question, another problem that comes to is basically, okay, now does the claim analyst um, will need to know this SQL syntax or SQL code to interact with the data, or for that matter, actually whether JSON needs to be understood, the structure of the document needs to be, which are the properties to be understood, the data types needs to be understood, right? In reality, that is where actually the Gen AI gives the most value, because you can ask natural language questions to this data, and then it can give you the answer in the way that the end user who is not using it technology jargon can actually get that question answered, right? So for that, we have a simple UI application that has been built. Right, so this is the same information. Basically, the claim information is now displayed over a UI. Here we are using the REST API calls from exposed by MarkLogic to build this UI. But the focus area here is, okay, I'm going to ask a question, give the list of patients having diabetes with neuropathy, right? So I'm asking that question. So let's see what is actually happening behind the scene, right? So behind the scene, what that UI is essentially doing is it is calling out to a Python code, and MarkLogic comes with a Python client, Spark connector, all those technologies which are more common in the machine learning, artificial intelligence space, right? MarkLogic supports all those languages as well. So um, we are using a Spark connector, and then um, we are setting up a prompt for the Gen AI to work. We get the data from the Spark using a Spark data frame. We are calling a LangChain agent, which is essentially a capability to call the OpenAI, and then we are asking the question to the OpenAI and writing the result back into MarkLogic itself. Like MarkLogic being a multi-model database, you do not really need to model the answer the way that Gen AI is producing to write it back to MarkLogic, because MarkLogic is schema agnostic. Whatever Gen AI produces, you can write it back into MarkLogic. Right? So let us see whether the answer, we got the answer or not. So we got the answer, or the list of the patients having diabetics with neuropathy are. So this is the raw format in which Gen AI is answering. Intentionally, I have not parsed the format actually to ensure that the data whatever Gen AI is producing, we can get that answer. We can store it in MarkLogic and maybe go for a manual review later if needed. Okay, so let me take one of this patient ID, and I'm going to ask a very specific question. Uh, what diagnosis have been performed or done on patient? Okay, so I'm going to ask this specific question to the system. So if you really look at it, actually, the I as a claim specialist is not interacting with any language. For say, I'm asking the very natural language question and using all of the Gen AI capabilities to convert that into the the queries which MarkLogic understand automatically, and we are getting the response in that. So while yeah, so it is giving me all the diagnosis codes. So now this diagnosis codes is something that the claim analyst can easily understand. It has given all the diagnosis codes this patient has been diagnosed with. Okay, now I'm so we are focusing on patients with diabetic with neuropathy, right? So another set of data that is always there in healthcare companies are the benefits documents, many PDFs, research documents, and stuff like that, right? So I'm going to pick up one document which has been loaded into MarkLogic. Okay, so this is a PDF document, multi-page PDF document. This has been loaded into MarkLogic. Again, I repeat, MarkLogic is a multi-model database. Binary data is also it's a first class citizen in MarkLogic, right? So if you sorry yeah, when I'm exploring it, actually I have a PDF document also stored in MarkLogic, right? So let us interact with those PDF documents now. Okay, so I have loaded this Acme documents. What I have done is this four documents. They are big documents actually, so I have chunked them into 184 separate documents. Now I am going to ask a question. So we already identified the patients with diabetic neuropathy. Now the next logical question is actually, according to Acme, what treatment options are medically required for diabetic neuropathy? Right? So I'm asking that question now. Now let's see what is happening behind the scene is actually the same philosophy, but I am calling another Python program. But instead of a Spark data frame creation and those things, actually, I am searching in MarkLogic, getting the most relevant results, the search results from MarkLogic, and presenting it into Gen AI for answering the question. Okay, the later part is the same. I write it back into MarkLogic, the Gen AI response for future references, for any kind of fine tuning or maybe a knowledge model building for those kind of capabilities. So let's see whether it has been created. Yeah. So it says that Acme considers electrical stimulation and dorsal column stimulation as medically necessary, and it also gives the sources from which the documents were the answer was generated, right? So it gives the traceability to the source documents, which is also stored in MarkLogic, right? So you get a full cycle of doing it. Okay, now it can be done in a chat style. So here we are actually integrating it with another Progress product called a native chat. Okay, so the same question can be asked the chat window as well. So basically what I'm highlighting is you can interact with the data in the way that your system demands or your use case demands, in a QA style or in a chat style. Yeah, you can do that. Okay, I'm expecting the same answer to be generated by Gen AI here as well. Okay, so yeah, that's about the demo at this point. I'll just check finally whether Yeah, so it gave that the same answer. I may consider percutaneous electrical stimulation and dorsal column stimulation as medically necessary, and it gives you the same answer. Okay, so this is what we had to we have to show today with respect to the demo. Now it's over to Philip for the Q&A.
Cheers, BG. Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. Oh, there we go. So there we go. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, let's get on to the Q&A. If you gentlemen could share your cameras, and then we'll start the presentation, or the Q&A, should I say? BG, Imran, are you there? Ah, there we go. Perfect. All right, let me stop showing that. Let's see if I can see everybody. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Sorry about this. What's going on with GoToWebinar? There you go. Okay, so can everybody see our cameras?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So Imran, a couple of questions, or quite a few questions actually coming in, but I wanted to start off with, if I build this solution, so if I build on MarkLogic, am I tied to like one LLM with the solution? Just wondered if that was possible or not.
So the MarkLogic semaphore data platform is. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback here.
No worries.
Bill, I guess if you can just go on mute for a second.
Yeah, no problem. So give me 2 seconds. I'll put right, there we go. I got a mute.
All right. So the MarkLogic and semaphore data platform is completely independent of large language models, and in fact, it's really independent of the sources of your data too. So the whole point of having the data in this kind of a platform is to be able to reuse it, not only for different large language models, but also for different downstream systems and the like, right? So the thing about the data platform, the way we've constructed it, is we now elevate the conversation from rows and columns to here's the business object, here's the other business object, and here's how they're related. And the relationship is also stored in the database as well, so that anybody who understands very high-level semantic graph can take advantage of all of the data and all of the relationships that exist in your data platform. So the reusability is very much there. Also, typically in vector databases, you really have to tie your data very tightly to the embedding vector model. Even though we use vectors in our system, we don't tie them directly to the embedding models very tightly.
Okay, so you're kind of building a data platform for AI solutions to go on top of, whether it's chatbot or whether it's some other solution that you're looking for. Okay.
Right.
And so because there's a lot of talk of vector databases out there, and one question is, what's the difference between the Progress data platform and a vector database?
Sure. So a vector database requires you to have a text embedding model usually from one of the Gen AI service providers, or an open text embedding model as well. When you decide to take your 100 billion chunks of documents and assign a vector to them in a vector database, you are committing to consuming a lot of compute and a lot of storage to do that activity. The other thing to note is that when you pick your embedding model, you are stuck with that embedding model. If you want to change that embedding model and go from, say, text embedding 3 small to text embedding 3 large, which are 2 different embedding models that OpenAI provides, for example, you would literally have to re-index all of your 100 billion document chunks to take advantage of that.
Right.
So that's a really sort of heavy compute to get the semantics that you need. With MarkLogic and Semaphore data platform, if you change the semantics of your graph, you've instantly changed the retrieval paradigm and the retrieval relevancy and recall capabilities of the system. In addition to that, papers have been written recently that showed if you combine semantic search with vector relevancy, you can get even better recall than vector databases alone. So why not do it? Why not use
Yeah.
both capabilities?
Yeah, and I was talking to a customer who's doing kind of just exactly that. They're taking a vector database and combining it with our RAG-based approach and trying to get the best of both worlds. So it'd be interesting to see when that's fully developed what that comes to. Um, I guess this is a question maybe for Bijou, but or maybe both of you. But can the flow functionality that we saw with the Data Hub, can that be used for business processes and development of those?
Yes, definitely. That is the data flows. As I mentioned, flows is a sequence of data processing steps. So data processing steps are business rule implementations. So there are like data processing capable functions that are pre-built, but you can build your own. You can extend those and or combine those together and build another set of rules. Or
Yeah,
if none of those really works out, actually there is a capability of custom step development. So basically in the demo we saw mapping, matching, merging functions, but the last tab was really we didn't go there actually, but that is the custom step actually where you develop your own JavaScript or XQuery functions and you can build all the business rules that you want actually.
yeah.
Said
And
that, I think yeah,
yeah, go
there is
ahead.
there is an important update probably that can be shared at this point is Progress has a business rule engine in itself, a product called the Corticon, and we are in works of integrating MarkLogic and Corticon so that the Corticon business rules can be run as server-side modules in MarkLogic. So that
Yeah.
release will come very soon. Actually. So,
Yeah, we've actually got Corticon guys on our community event next week, and they're going to demo the integration between Corticon and MarkLogic with their latest release. So if you're interested in that, especially sort of the way I view MarkLogic and Semaphore and the Progress Data Platform is that's your data rules. It's handling the rules about your data. If you've got rules or processes within your business that you need to follow, Corticon can kind of extract that work and provide a good UI to do that. So it's worth checking out. Question here: does your company follow any open international data standards and consider the future of interoperability?
Sure. From a data standards perspective, all of the data coming into the system is very standardized. XML and JSON are typical. CSVs for databases. So a lot of sort of very standard ways of pulling data into the system. On the way out, you can do the exact same thing. You can have JSON coming out through our APIs, or XML, or Sparkle. And from a query perspective, you can also use SQL. So a lot of very standards-based ways of getting data in and out of our data platform.
so wherever applicable, W3C and RFC standards are maintained, and that is for the same reason. Actually, MarkLogic as a triple store is very interoperable with other triple stores, and because it is following the RFC standard of RDFs.
Yeah, and I know we do a lot of other work. We've got a lot of standards organizations that use MarkLogic for various different aspects of the value chain of what they're producing for their customers. And actually, one of my colleagues was actually at the IPTC event in New York, I think it was New York, this week, where we're actually working with them to help develop the standard further. and show how that works within MarkLogic. So so there'll be more on that. I think he's got a blog actually, might come out today on that. So do check that out on progress.com.
Yes. Coming to that, actually, the healthcare standards like FHIR or HLC, they are also like they are XML based or JSON based standards. So they can also be those such documents are storable in MarkLogic. They can be transformed into that format in MarkLogic. So we have done like that.
Yeah, I think we've done it for quite a few different verticals: finance, healthcare, manufacturing, and more. So yeah, it's very flexible what you can do with that while still following those standards. So yeah, I've got two questions. They're kind of in one really, which is how do you secure the personal information? And you said about the patient, but this could be about any record, I guess. And is Gen AI data made public in the use case you have demonstrated?
Right. So because we have document level security, role-based security, element level security, a lot of three-letter US government agencies use us all over the place. But that also is also useful for any of our commercial applications around security-related issues. Basically, when a person asks a question, if that person has the right role to see the documentation that might be related to the question that he's asking of the Gen AI, those documents will flow to the Gen AI. If he doesn't have access, the person who's asking the question doesn't have access to a role, those other documents that are not accessible by that person will also not be fed to the Gen AI system. And so security basically flows from the document or element level that is tied directly to the people and the roles that they have. So security pretty much flows through any Gen AI solution that you create based on the roles that you've got in your system. And typically these roles are tied to LDAP or Active Directory in large organizations.
Yeah, and it can be done the other way, I think, as well with queries. So you can do query-based access controls as well that within MarkLogic. So certain queries will pull up certain data and things like that. So there's many different ways to secure the data and have more trust in that security as you're using the Gen AI and not just rely on sort of third parties for that. How was the model training done for the Acme project? One person has asked here.
So we didn't do any model training at all. We're using standard Azure OpenAI models. ChatGPT 3.5 and 4 are perfectly good models. What we're doing is we're understanding what the question or task is, and based on that, we're getting custom private data that we're feeding into the prompt as part of the information that the Gen AI has to do its computations.
Yeah, so we're using those available models to leverage them and interrogate your own private data to give you better, more complete and accurate answers. So yeah. Well, look, this has been great, Imran and Bijo. I think we've got through most of the questions. If we've missed any, because we did get a few, if we've missed any of them, we'll make sure to reach out afterwards and follow up with you directly. If you've got any questions for us, please do reach out. Join us on progress.com/MarkLogic, I believe. That should bring you through to the right site. Yeah, thank you again to Imran and Biju for putting together your presentation and demos there. It was really good to see the behind the scenes of what we're doing with the RAG solution and how that works within our data platform. So yeah, both of you, thank you very much. Thank you for the audience for joining us today. Please do check out our CourseCon featured community event next week on Thursday. But for now, I think we'll call it an end. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you, audience, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.